What's up, guys? As I told you in my library tour, I was getting a haircut, and as you can see, my hair is flat against my head from wearing a hat, but don't have nearly as much hair in my face as I did, and still basically clean shaven compared to the full beard I was rocking. I do have a bit of a beard going on. You didn't tune into this to watch me talk about fashion. I'm about, well, I'm not equipped to talk about fashion. I'm not about as anything. I'm just not equipped. It's not my main focus or pastime. But there is a pastime, and this pastime is reading. Today is not a specific author video. I'm going to talk briefly about what I've read for the past probably 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. I think it's about 2.5. And we'll go from there. It's 4 books that I'll discuss, but also this is a status update video. So the 4 books are not going to be exactly the whole focus. If that sounds interesting to you, I'm Mark, and this is Several Books. Okay, so I did an update once before and mentioned some nonfiction books that I was going to read. This is basically because I'm in the current pursuit of reading some nonfiction. Where I basically am right now is I'm reading a lot of psychoanalytic theory. I was looking at a PhD reading list for people who read theory for a PhD program, and I saw first that I had actually completed the requirements that PhD program requires of its students. Not that I had been accepted to the program and all of this, but they give you a list of like 100 books or something, and you have to read some from this section and some over here and whatnot. And it turns out over the past 10 plus years, I had completed what they recommend of a person studying for a PhD. Of course, I had that for like I said, 10 plus years. I've been reading theory for quite a while, but not always as pointedly and seriously as I have over the last, say, 10 years. So, there are 4 books, if you want to see those. The 4 books that I've read, the first is Lacan, and I read La Relation d'Objet, ici. And I read this, I finished it last week, I think, or sometime in last week. I don't remember exactly where. But what's really interesting about this specific book is that, first I want to say, there is a canonical Lacan text. I've looked at different school programs and what they offer. So that is the Lacanian text. If you're taking Lacan in school, you're probably going to cover that. I've seen it multiple places. I never encountered Lacan when I was in college, but he is important, and that is the text that is typically read. I have read that book in English. I'm actually planning on reading it in French. I bought a copy. Last time I had read it on through a library, I think. And basically, I'm going to try to reread that in French. The other Lacan that I've read is L'Angoisse, or Anxiety is how it's translated in English. And I've read the Lacan seminar on the psychosis. This is, of the Lacan that I've read, probably actually the most interesting. So if you're interested in Lacan, I have to say that you should read the 4 fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis. But what I'm also going to say is that La Relation d'Objet is the most interesting of the other books that I've read of his. Granted, I haven't read a huge amount. What's interesting about this to me that I didn't realize is that the object is a specific thing in psychoanalysis. It's basically the thing that you're interested in, and so you're investing yourself in this object. It is the object of desire. So a lot of this book is talking about the child-parent relationship between the mother and the father, and we're getting a lot of reference to the Oedipus complex, for instance, and things like that. But what's really interesting about this is that he's using terminology that would be used and was used by psychoanalytic professionals, but that sounds really strange to us normal people. And the way I want to talk about this is that the other basically word for the object is the phallus. Now, when I say phallus, I'm sure you're thinking of something totally different. But for Lacan, the object is the symbolic phallus. And this grows out of the familial relation. Basically, the idea is that the father has the phallus, literally. Then there's the mother. After things that happen with fathers and mothers, there is a baby. And the baby effectively becomes the woman's symbolic phallus and is the object of desire of the father. This probably sounds really all over the place. I don't feel comfortable talking to you guys about Lacan like I'm a professor. I haven't read enough Lacan. I've read Lacan. I can talk to somebody who's never read or who has read him and understand terms and so on and so forth. But I do not feel comfortable teaching you guys psychoanalysis. I don't have any training in it formally. I had psychiatry when I was in college because it was a required class, and that's basically the extent of this. He then notes that essentially a fetish and a phobia are the same thing. So it's just in a mirror image, basically. It's the negative or the castrating aspect of the fetish that becomes the phobia. They're very similar. He devotes probably the last 200 or 300 pages of this book. My copy of this is about 610 pages, and he devotes significant time to that. So if you're interested, take this as a general recommendation. Read the 4 fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis, but if you're looking for a book by Lacan after, this is probably going to be just as interesting to you as something like the Écrit might be. There's no reason to necessarily go out and buy the textbook type book, L'Écrit, or Les Écrits, but yeah, it is what it is. So that's basically our first touching on of what's going on in my life right now. Very interested in Lacan. I'm going to be reading a total of 10 books by Lacan. When all said and done, I have 4 Lacan books coming for me. But this is what's going on. I'm interested in psychoanalysis right now, and I don't want to scare that motivation away. So we're going to be focusing on Lacan a little bit, and we're making a movie right now. The second book that I read that is about psychoanalysis is The Selected Melanie Klein. Now, this is a famous, very famous psychoanalysis book. Melanie Klein is very famous as kind of developing what it's like for adults to interact with children from a psychoanalytic perspective, and she basically figured out a way that she could psychoanalyze children using all of the symbolic jargon and so on. She does that by playing with toys. There are a few things in here that are surprising. A few things I think wouldn't have been done today that she did when she was psychoanalyzing kids in the book. But this is an interesting book. The other thing is that I had never read Melanie Klein before. I thought I had just read Anna Freud. So here's Melanie Klein selected. This is what I've been reading, and this is a solid book. The third book I read is Playing and Reality by D.W. Winnicott. I don't know what his first name is. I think it's Donald. Anyway, I saw that the really interesting thing supposedly from this book is what Winnicott calls transitional objects. And essentially these are objects that remain stable while a person goes through a difficult time. So I would think of transitional objects that children are pictured with often as, for instance, like a blanket or something like that. And essentially they allow the kid to be grounded while this is going on. Winnicott's perspective on psychoanalysis seems to be much friendlier and forwardly involved on working with the analyzing or the patient. That is certainly very different than Lacan. When we think of Lacan, typically we think of somebody very austere, probably kind of harsh or even angry when you're looking at his videos online. If you ever feel like checking that out, you can. He's certainly an interesting guy to watch, but he's very aware that he's on stage when these videos are being made. I thought this was interesting, but when you're reading all this psychoanalysis together, it kind of bleeds together. I do know that that Lacan, who is the main focus for me, had read Melanie Klein, and in the beginning of one of the essays in this book, Winnicott, excuse me, he's English. He references Lacan's mirror stage. So there's that. Overall, this is not a groundbreaking book for me, but it's a very significant work of psychoanalytic theory. I've seen it referenced many times, and if your idea and your goal is to read broadly in a specific subject, which is mine, and right now the subject is psychoanalysis, then it's necessary to read Winnicott, if nothing else, just to get your numbers up, to read more famous psychoanalysis, if you understand what I'm saying. So I don't think that this book is likely going to change my life, but I'm very glad that I read it, and it does add to my understanding of psychoanalytic theory. The final book that I'm going to talk about that I am currently reading, I haven't actually finished it yet. I am on page 163 of about 250 before the work cited. I think it's 250. Where are we? Ladies and germs, just a moment. We'll come up 244. So I'm on page 160 of page 244. This is Zizek. If who I had anticipated watching me watch this channel, then nobody who's seeing this video should be surprised who Zizek is. However, it's not the case. That I don't know what the tastes are of all of my audience. When I've seen different comments and talked to different people, I seem to be getting a lot of different levels of education and interest. Zizek is very well known now. Basically, he has kind of a stand-up comic presence. So he's got, I think, 2 PhDs in psychoanalysis and in sociology. And he is essentially doing for a contemporary audience what the Frankfurt School used to do in the 50s. He's combining Marx, Lacan instead of Freud, and Hegel, and he's doing this to diagnose and describe society. Essentially, I think you'd call it like qualitative sociology if you had to pin down a specific term on that. I'm reading this book. I've read other Zizek, but on that PhD program syllabus that I saw, this was listed under both the psychoanalytic schools of what they offer a degree for, and also the Marxists. So I figured I could kill two birds with one stone. This is not my favorite Zizek book. I have read In Defense of Lost Causes, The Sublime Object of Ideology, The Parallax View. There's one other book, and a book, How to Read Lacan for Beginners, basically. So that was my introduction to Lacan, is Zizek. I'm not super psyched about Zizek anymore. When it was 2011, and I was or 2010, and I was in college, and I kind of had an idea who Zizek was, which not many of my classmates did yet. I'm sure they would if they stayed in academics. I used to love Zizek. I thought he was just right about everything, and I couldn't take the idea that anybody would criticize him for anything. I'm not really in that headspace anymore. I don't particularly love Zizek. I think he can be interesting. He can be very funny. He's certainly interesting enough to write what could conceivably be seen as some type of work approaching the canon. But this specific book, my main criticism of it is that the chapters aren't really very different. And he's split up his chapters, and then they're split up into sections, and it all kind of runs together like one long tirade. A tirade's probably not quite right. He doesn't seem like he's ranting so much. He's not angry or anything. But this is an okay book. It's just not great. If you are curious about Zizek, or you know who he is, my recommendation of the Zizek that I've read is to read the two books, The Sublime Object of Ideology and The Parallax View. Now, we should read The Sublime Object of Ideology just because primarily it's read by so many people. If there is a canonical Zizek work, it's likely going to be that book and maybe some of his later work. I believe that was his one of his first books written. So that will teach you a lot about Lacan. He references writers like Benjamin in it and other Frankfurt School guys. It's pretty good. It's not groundbreaking. The Parallax View, on the other hand, is a very whole, significant work. And I would earnestly recommend that to basically anyone. And that's me not being a Zizek fan anymore. I'm interested in him. He doesn't offend me. But I really don't care if he's writing books still. If you go reading around in Zizek, what you'll see frequently is that he will reuse sections from previous books. And sometimes they're only barely rewritten. So it can feel like if you read 4 books that you're only reading 2 because he's using the same information in other books. I don't see that as much in this book, but I don't know much about what Zizek has been writing, say, since the time that he wrote The Parallax View. The Parallax View is great. It really is just like a whole philosophy book. And if anyone likes writers like Deleuze or any writers like that, certain philosophy books, I could see a Foucauldian, Foucault guy being interested in Zizek. My firm recommendation for that is The Parallax View. So again, this is an okay book. I'm finishing it as soon as I turn this camera off, but it's not his best work of the work that I've read. And again, when you're reading Zizek, I would really look at book recommendations because he does reuse material. I don't think his audience for a lot of books is actually academics. I really think that he's trying to appeal to various types of radicals. I'm not sure the degree to which his purpose is really to change minds so much as create an edifice in the text that a person can function with and begin to identify certain ways of analyzing political occurrences. So that's basically all the books that I was going to talk about. I did just kind of come in and sit down to make this video. I don't know how well this is going to go when the video is actually, on YouTube. But yeah, that's what I'm reading. So I've got these 4 guys about psychoanalysis, and that's why I haven't made a video on someone else. Now that we've gone through those 4 books, I need to tell you kind of where my goal is. So I have 4 books by Lacan coming in the mail, and I plan on reading all of those. Basically, everything will come together that I've read Lacan in terms of I will have read the Écrits, L'Autre Écrit, the other writings. I don't think that book is actually available in English yet. Eventually, I'm sure it will be, but it's not really a central focus. It's shorter essays that just weren't really good enough to get into the Écrit. Then I will have from Seminar 2 until 10, I believe. And it will probably take me, I believe I can read one of the seminars about 1 a week. The next one I have is about 700 pages. It's in French. I probably won't read that in the 5 days of a work week, but put together with the weekend, if I'm not really doing much else but reading Lacan, I can probably read that in maybe a week. It might take a few days extra. I'm thinking going in French, like, yeah, I should be able to read conceivably 100 pages a day. I think it's much more likely, though, that I'll probably be reading 75 pages on work days and then binge reading on the weekend. And so I'll be able to get those Lacan seminars out for a video if that's the case. This book was about 600 pages. The pages are just like American pages. You've got just as much text, so this really isn't taking it easy the way some French texts do. So my goal is to read basically what the requirements would be in this class that I found a syllabus about had I the chance, the good luck to participate in a PhD program. So I'm going to read that in psychoanalysis. I just got a second book by Julia Kristeva, one of her earlier works. It's called Polylogue in French. I don't know what the English title is. It's much longer in English. I'm getting the Lacan, and I'm going to be reading, let's see, there's another book on semiology by Kristeva I'm going to read. There's a book about art and trauma. And then there's a book that has the subtitle something like Subjectivity at the Margins, or Male Subjectivity at the Margins. It's basically psychoanalysis, except it's focusing on male figures. And one of the interesting things of that for me was the person who wrote the book, can't remember their name, discusses Henry James. And Henry James is discussed all over the place. I love Henry James. even me just now, I probably have 3 critical works on Henry James on my bookshelves. It's not direct. For instance, the Parallax View contains like a 50-page essay as one of the final chapters on Henry James. I've got the Epistemology of the Closet, and I think he's mentioned elsewhere. Current goal is to finish this psychoanalytic study and also read some other theory, though. And this is where we get into kind of where we are right now. Now, I tried to make this video about a week and a half ago, and I really didn't like the way that it came together. So I'm just remaking the video, letting you know where I am, what my interests are, and to basically say my channel might be a little slow for the next, say, 2 months. I'm going to try to make a video for you guys every other week, but I can't even promise that. And the reason for this is basically that my current reading interests are pretty specialized. It's a lot harder to make numerous videos about somebody like Lacan, especially when you don't feel confident getting into the objet petit a, l'objet with the grand majuscule a, and other stuff like that. Like if I'm talking about specific parts of Lacan, it's a much different video, and frankly, I'm going to have to write out a script, which I don't really do before these videos. So do I have a goal for this? Not really. Yeah, I made this 30-minute video just to tell you what's up. I'm reading all this psychoanalysis. I'm not going to have a lot of videos about novels or poets coming out in the next, say, 2 to 3 months. I don't know exactly, but I'm going to be reading a lot of theory. If I make videos, the way that the videos are typically going to go is probably the way that you've seen my other videos before and this video. I'm not going to be teaching you Lacanian concepts. I'm not doing it. I don't feel comfortable doing it. And there are some really good videos on YouTube about Lacan. So if that's your thing, there are people with PhDs making videos where their whole focus in school after a certain point was basically just Lacan. It's better to just listen to those people rather than listen to me. Because they're doing what they've been trained to do, basically. If they're talking about Lacan, talking about all those concepts, they've been trained heavily in that, and I haven't. As far as novels go, it's conceivable that I will read a novel by William T. Vollmann. I do have a novel by him. Part of me has been thinking about trying to make a video for you guys about Philip K. Dick. I'm a really big Philip K. Dick fan. He's not my favorite writer, but I've read like 14 Philip K. Dick books. I kind of, if I were to do that, would want to reread some of them, and that becomes a problem. Things that I want to do. There was a guy on my channel who mentioned Virginia Despentes a few times at a video and saying that he'd like to see a Despentes video. He did eventually find my video on the whores, the 8 writers who wrote about whores. And Virginia Despentes is included in that list, and I do discuss her a little bit. But as far as upcoming videos on fiction go, there's a possibility I could make a video about William T. Vollmann, but I'm not promising anything. There's a possibility that I could make a video about Philip K. Dick, but I'm not promising anything. There's a possibility that I could make a video about Virginia Despentes, but I'm not promising anything. If you guys have seen any books on my bookshelves through the library tour that you'd like to hear about, or any writers like that, leave a note. Where I really am right now, and I'm about to end this video in just a minute, is that if I could get some feedback from you guys as to what you'd like to see, that would be really cool. I am open. One thing I was thinking of doing was I know a few different people who live outside the U.S., and I imagine this channel is very U.S. centric. I'm an American. I could interview them about books that meant a lot to them and why they did. My one French prof, I think, has maybe an interesting story about Tolstoy, but I would have to talk to her and see if she felt like being on video. I'm not even sure that I totally want to do that, but that is one thing I've been thinking about doing. So again, I'm about to cut out, but where I really am is that I've gone through my whole library. I sort of intentionally did a library tour to be able to talk about some of these writers that I had been mentioning in other videos that I hadn't gotten around to. And I figured that would be entertaining for you, hopefully. If there's any writers that you want to suggest I read, please leave a note. If anybody saw anything on my bookshelves that they're interested in, please leave a note. Other than that, we're going to call this done. I appreciate you guys. I like making videos, but I want to make sure they're informative and valuable to you. And where I am right now is that I am really interested in theory and really interested in psychoanalysis. And I don't know why. There's not a good reason for it, just the passion took me. All right. So that's everything. Thanks, you guys, and you have a great day. Bye-bye. Several Books out.